Of Waterford City that John Condon was born and raised. Well, today nothing remains of the house in which he was brought up with his two brothers and two sisters. However, as is the way of things in most Irish towns and cities, if you know where a family once lived, it's highly likely you can track them down.
And this man is also John Condon. He now lives across the river shore in the Ferrybank area of the city. But his father, Pat, and his uncle John had lived at Wheelbarrow Lane. So this John Condon is the nephew of the boy soldier.
My father's name was Patrick, and he used to tell us wild stories about John when John was about 9 years of age. John used to have this wooden gun, and he taught a lot of it, you know. And he used to run up and down the street, and tell people that when he grew up, he's going to join the army. Waterford was a very poor town, if you want to put it like that. You see, they all had small houses, like 2 Thomas's Avenue where he was born. There was only 2 bedrooms in there, and there was 5 or 6 in the family there at the time. And so John used to spend a lot of his time down at my cousin's house, which is down in Jenkins Lane. He used to sleep down there now and again.
The boy who was later to die at Ypres was best friend of his cousin Nicholas, who was 2 or 3 years older. Together they went to school with the Christian Brothers in Waterford. Together they dreamed of a wider world, itching for excitement and adventure. But their first journey would be their last.
They decided to go down around adventures, like they decided to take a walk down around the quay, which was all the boats were. And they see this boat down there, and they just manoeuvred onto the boat, never said nothing to nobody, just ran on there. And hid there and the boat pulled away.
Well, my father's name was Nicholas Condon, and he was the first cousin to young John Condon. They were probably as wild as anybody else at the time. They were wild and they were looking for a bit of adventure and excitement. So they went off together.
They went to Liverpool. They went to Liverpool then, and they managed to find out where our uncle was in Lancashire and made their way up to Lancashire.
The 2 of them were there, and then there's a letter stating that from John to his mother, stating that he was with his cousin Nicholas Condon, the shoemaker from Eve's Lane, and that he was thinking, John himself was thinking of joining the army, but he said Nicholas, he's looking for more excitement, some words to that effect, you know. But then John came home and Nicholas joined the army in England, the York and Lancaster Regiment.
And that's where the boyhood friends parted company. They could not, of course, have known that within a year one would lie seriously wounded, the other dead.
I think that's the last you see of one another. Nicholas survived the war, obviously, died years later. They used to call them the Condon twins, because you couldn't separate them. They were no matter one went, the 2 went.
1914, and the Great War was raging across Europe. Men of so-called fighting age and France. In Ireland, thousands of men were answering the call, joining the British Army and heading off to war, each for his own reasons.
With young lads, especially from big families, they wanted a bit of excitement and adventure. They also needed jobs, which weren't here. So they went off to look for adventure and jobs elsewhere. Well, the army offered good pay and conditions at the time.
Ireland and England were all part of the British Commonwealth, and if you wanted to join the army, which many young lads even today do and did then, the British Army is the one that you would join, and what else would you do? It was surprisingly common for Waterford men to sign up to the British Army. Many were actually in the army before the war started, and we figured that maybe 5,000 or 10,000, 5 to 10,000 Waterford men took part in the First World War, so that virtually every family in the county had some family member taking part.
We have to remember too that the Member of Parliament for Waterford City was John Redmond. John Redmond was the leader of the Home Rule Party. He was a local hero. If Parnell was the uncrowned King of Ireland, Redmond was the uncrowned King of Ballybricken. He had defended the pig buyers in the great pig buyers dispute of the 1890s, which had gone on for years. And so they regarded him with a certain adulation. And when Redmond encouraged young Irishmen to go and join the British Army in 1914 and inferred that in some indirect way they would be speeding the cause of Home Rule, it would be natural for John Condon and many others like him to join the British Army and go off and fight in the World War?
Well, of course, they were into excitement. They were young men. And then there were posters all over the place with the local MP, John Redmond, asking people to say, your country needs you, and recruiting people to the British Army, which was the army then, fought to fight for small nations, our own included. And I believe it's for those reasons that they went off to fight.
Well, when he was about 13, he went to join the LDF, as we call it, which was in Waterford then. And he gave his age as 16, 17.
They say he was a big, hardy-looking young fella. They say he looked older than his years. And as far as I was told, a lot of young lads did look that way in the past. Big, strong young lads. Otherwise they wouldn't get work. A lot of lads left school very early at the time.
It's fair to say that the authorities would never take in an underage lad into the forces. They weren't permitted to take part in active combat until they were 18. But they did take them in at younger ages, 17, for training purposes, and they kept them in the junior or reserve special militia until such time as it became 18. But having said that, many young lads gave false ages in their enthusiasm to join up.
John Condon lied about his age and went into training in the army barracks in Clonmel as part of the reserve force. The British troops at the front were taking a mighty pounding, with hundreds of thousands of casualties mounting up. Within a year, Condon would be called up into the regular army and sent to the continent. He never told his family he was going, perhaps because they would have told the truth about his age and stopped him, but we don't know. As he headed off to war, he was just under 14 years of age.
But John was moved out. My father didn't know anything about it when he was moved over to France. But 1915, they called for a battalion from Dublin, and John got away with that battalion somehow.
I don't think that when they left Waterford, John Condon and his comrades had any idea of what they were facing into. They imagined that this war, like previous recent wars, would be short and decisive, and there would not be many casualties, and they would be returning as local heroes. And of course, the real situation was very different. The war was not over by Christmas 1914. The fighting was very bloody.